Hello and welcome to this, the fourth video in the Historic Pubs of Wales series. Today coming to you from the ancient monastic town of Llantwit Major in the Vale of Glamorgan, where we're going to be looking at some absolutely cracking pubs. But first, let's cover off some of this town's extraordinary history. It's a little known fact that this small town was in fact the seat of Britain's first ever educational institute of any kind. It was founded back in the year 508 by St Illtyd himself. It was a hybrid of a school and a university, and it led to Llantwit Major being the place where the royal households of Europe sent their children to be educated.
It's claimed that at its height, the Cor Tudis, as it was known, had over 2,000 students enrolled. Its alumni included St David, the patron saint of Wales, and St Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, and Gildas. In case you're not familiar with Gildas, who he is and what he did, he is a great example of the standard of scholarship this institution turned out. Gildas the Wise, as he became known, was the man who gave us one of the most thorough contemporary records of the war between the ancient Britons and the invading Saxon hordes recorded. More than 1,000 years after its death, it is still one of the main authorities for the entire period during the reign of the now legendary king, King Arthur of the court of Camelot, he of Round Table fame.
Arthurian links with Llantwit Major go well beyond Gildas. Where I'm standing now is on the edge of an old Iron Age hill fort known locally as the Castle Ditches. There are claims made that this was in fact the actual site of King Arthur's court of Camelot, where knights of the Round Table would dance whenever they are able. Before we get too excited about this claim, maybe we should know a little bit more about the man who made it. His real name was Edward Williams, but he went by his bardic name of Iolo Morgannwg. Now, a lot of what he uncovered was some very interesting and some very genuine history. However, it wasn't all quite that good. For example, he actually got convicted and imprisoned for fraudulently falsifying historical documents. So he's always to be approached with a little bit of caution. Now, it was him who claimed that the Castle Ditches down above Colhew Beach was the actual site of King Arthur's court of Camelot. So maybe we should take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. Incidentally, he also took an interest in the Cor. He claimed that it was established in the year 308. Like I say, he is to be approached with caution. Now, you may be wondering what happened to it. This was a very well-established foundation. It had a lot of patronage. It had a phenomenal reputation for the scholarly output. And these Johnny-come-lately institutions at Oxford and Cambridge, they're still around, but it was Llantwit Major that started the whole university scene off. So what happened here?
Unfortunately, the Cor was ransacked and its treasures and relics stolen by the Normans when Robert FitzHammond conquered South Wales in the 12th century. He had anything of value transferred to the Abbey at Tewkesbury, and that withdrew virtually all of its income streams. Without wealth or patronage, the Cor limped on like a wounded beast for a few more centuries, but it was a tiny shadow when Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries in the mid-16th century. At that point, the trustees of the old institution founded a new one, a secular one that carried on the reputation for excellence in education that the Cor had pioneered. It became the Cowbridge Grammar School, which they established just up the road, but that may be for another time. So far as the Cor Tudis goes, this church, its grounds, and the ruins dotted hereabout are all that remains of the original Cor and Britain's first and possibly most prestigious university. That and a few street names that throw up a few clues to this amazing wealth of history.
If there's one thing students have always loved, it's a decent pub close by. So given the historic backdrop of Llantwit Major, it's hardly any surprise that we have two such absolutely fantastic pubs on either side of the ancient medieval town square, the Old Swan Inn and the White Hart Inn.
As you are about to discover, the Swan just has the edge in terms of story value, but that's not to say that there's nothing to be said about the White Hart and its history. The White Hart is predominantly 14th century, but it stands on the site of a far older building. The masonry in the cellar walls is believed to have been once part of a Romano-Celtic structure, possibly contemporary with the 6th century monastery next door. This certainly goes some way to explaining the many regulars who have reported the apparition of a Roman soldier marching through the walls of the inn. There also used to be a trapdoor in the cellar, which opens onto a flight of steps. This is believed to be the entrance to a secret passageway which links to a series of tunnels dug from the old monastery, maybe an escape route from when the university frequently came under attack from Irish and Viking raiders, or possibly a hangover from the Reformation. On the other side of the square, the building which houses the Old Swan Inn was originally a Tudor merchant's house, and like most pubs dating back that far, over the years it has absorbed other buildings around it. However, most of what you see today is 16th century, and in remarkably good condition too, especially the rather ornate windows.
This was not the first building on this site. As far back as the 11th century, there was a building here. The one that stood here originally was in fact the Royal Mint, appointed by the King of Morgannwg, Iestyn ap Cwrgan. It was he who was ultimately vanquished by those invading Norman armies we spoke about earlier, who sacked the Cor.
In 1640, the then owner Edward Maddock was given license to mint his own coins in response to a general shortage of currency at the time. This was not uncommon, and during the English Civil War, which only started a few years later in 1642, you would frequently find the holders of such licenses, who were generally supporters of the king, smelting tokens with a head and shoulders image of King Charles I on one side and a pledge of support on the other. It's from this practice that we end up with lots of old pubs dotted around the country called the King's Head, referring to the image of the coin. This place was a shop back then rather than an inn, but this building has always attracted people intent on making money one way or another. A money-making venture of a very different kind came to roost here in the late 18th century.
Smuggling and piracy at this time was a way of life for most towns and villages across the heritage coast here in the Vale of Glamorgan. A local vicar became so despairing of the situation that when describing his flock, he said, "First they were smugglers, then they were pirates, now they are wreckers, and now there's not an honest man left among them." The Swan was more than simply involved in this racket. It was the headquarters.
At its helm was a man called Thomas Knight. He was a fearsome pirate and smuggler, and phenomenally astute in business. He had a fleet of large ships he had plundered from French merchants, and he set up a harbour big enough to moor and unload them at Barry Island, just a few miles up the coast. As much as Barry is today Wales's biggest town, back then it was just a village, conveniently tucked away from the prying eyes of the authorities.
He didn't do things by halves, this Thomas Knight. He built a quay at Barry Island that was big enough for him to be able to unload large ships. So much contraband was able to pass through as a result that he needed to build defences there in order to prevent it from being raided by the customs officials. But what really made this such a success for him was the willingness of the locals to get involved. We have on record that virtually the entire population of Barry was involved in this racket. That Thomas Knight was the landlord here at the Swan, and he ran his entire empire from a small upstairs bedroom.
The pubs of the Heritage Coast in general were pivotal to the success of the operation, as they provided cellars where booty could be hidden and distributed. Even after customs officials had smashed his empire, he personally evaded capture and disappeared without a trace. No doubt he had a well-stocked war chest waiting for such an eventuality. Like I said, he was a very astute businessman. Another astute businessman, who, like Thomas Knight, had a reputation for ruthlessness, provided the ancient pubs of Llantwit Major with an incredible flow of A-list celebrity visitors back in the early 20th century. St. Donat's Castle, no more than a few miles from here, was bought by the American newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst. He entertained many high-profile guests at his castle, and frequently the itinerary for the day would include a stroll into town along the coastal path to grab a pint at the Swan or the Hart. So it was that the likes of Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, Errol Flynn, David Lloyd George, Winston Churchill, and of course Hurst's mistress Marion Davis, all frequented these lovely old boozers. Randolph Hearst is now long gone, and these days St. Donat's Castle is the home of the Atlantic College, and that brings us full circle. You may recall at the beginning of this piece me telling you how back in the early 6th century Llantwit Major was the place where the royal households of Europe sent their children to be educated. Well, it still is.
Thank you ever so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you know other people who enjoyed it, then please feel free to share it on social media. It's one of a series of 4. I've already mentioned the first one was shot just up the road in Monknash, so please look out for more and make sure you catch up with the ones that we've done so far. But look, until the next time we meet, please enjoy your history.